Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about the riffs? Talking about our favorite albums containing riffs. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me, as always, are my friends in music, Justin J. Rutherford, Swindle, Dylan, Old Adams.
Don't know my middle name, do you there, asshole? Don't know.
You know mine?
Well, he doesn't. Rutherford's not my real middle name.
I know, but he's just
matter.
assuming that. He couldn't even make up one for me.
You know mine? All right. There you go.
Jimbo Johnson.
I wish. Damn. You may notice we have a fourth member on the podcast today.
Hello.
A man who has been referenced many, many times on this show.
That's true.
Making his appearance.
Once or twice.
Yeah, just a few times. You know, well, we know him. We love him. CJ. Hey, CJ.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm so glad you're here. I thought this would be really fun because you likely have no prior history with the record we're talking about today. And I thought, why not invite my pal to get his honest, truest take on a record?
Yeah, I know like one song from this band's like entire catalog basically that I like, other than like the hits that they have.
Yeah.
And then this album I'd never listened to, and I'm here. I'm not really well versed in speaking on music. Usually I just like something or I don't, and don't have a way to explain it. So I'm gonna struggle through this, but we're gonna have fun.
Same.
God damn it. Ask the question. Austin, ask the fucking question.
CJ, what makes a riff?
A riff. What makes a riff?
Mm-hmm. What is a riff?
What is a riff?
It's like when you go to a burger joint and you can get egg on the burger. Like you can add egg, and it's like only like it's like $1 extra to get an egg on the burger. That's a riff.
Does it being sunny side up have any determination on whether it's a riff or not? Like if it's over hard, is it a riff? And if it's sunny side up, is it a riff?
There's riffs. Those are just different kinds of riffs.
Okay.
It's all a riff. You got an egg on that burger. That's a riff.
I would have accepted a riff is being pulled by a sled dog group through the winter tundra. I would have accepted going to the movies and you get that good popcorn that has no kernels in it. Like I would have accepted anything.
All right. So Balto's a riff. And popcorn is a riff. There's just so much.
When Austin, Dylan, and I were joking about Austin potentially not being able to record, and you subbing in for him, I said that you would say ride in your convertible with your best girl to is a riff.
That's a riff. With the top down, that's a riff.
Right.
Wind in your hair.
Dylan, wind in your hair.
Well, you know, it once was there, but do I look like I've ever been in a fucking convertible in my life?
I mean,
I can't say you do.
There we go. Look, do you see the top of this?
Speaking of hair that used to be there, we're talking about Sad Wings of Destiny, Judas Priest, on today's episode of the podcast. I have been a longtime fan of this record, a longtime fan of this band, but let's throw it to CJ. CJ, you kind of alluded. You are a fan of one song in particular. And I know the song, and it's like genuinely kind of crazy that it is your answer. But tell us your relationship with Judas Priest.
I love Nostradamus. Not the
Wow.
album, just the song.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just the song.
I'm
I
like,
All right.
Yeah, I mean, he's predicting the damn future. It's awesome.
Wow.
yeah. When he
What-
brought it up, I was like, surely it's going to be
God.
like Living After Midnight,
Yeah.
Breaking the Law. He's like, no, actually, it's from the early 2000s concept record, Nostradamus, the title track. That record is
Yeah.
almost 2 hours long.
Yes. Like,
Oh my God.
So I remember when that record came out and looking at the running time of it, and I went, yeah, that's fine. That's all right. Because the first Priest record I ever owned was Angel of Retribution. I read about him, Ozfest 04, like we know kind of what my 04 year was. And I was like, I have to buy this like opening day because they were playing the single from that record on like modern rock radio. And it's like, all right, this is heavy shit. I got to hear this. But Nostradamus, a concept record.
When you looked at the runtime of this album, Dylan, you were like, I've never met him, but I feel like there's a guy named Swindle that's very angry somewhere.
Man, it was, I thought about writing Congress. I thought about writing my local senator. He played bass. So, I thought he would have some sort of hype. Huckabee.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought he would have some sort of help there. And it's like, nah, it just fell on deaf ears. I'm like, does anybody realize that this is almost as long as a fucking Scorsese film? Like, God. Anyway.
Swindle. What's your connection, if there is one, with Judas Priest?
I think I've only listened to British Steel.
Good record.
Hell yeah.
I don't really know why. My dad obviously loves like 80s metal. But when I was growing up, I don't ever remember him listening to Judas Priest.
Could it be the obvious thing?
Probably because he's an asshole. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say that, and not to cut you off on this, Swindle, early 2020, I went down this band's full catalog, like everything. I avoided some of the modern records, like I avoided Nostradamus just because it was so long. I didn't listen to the Ripper records at all. But I will say this band's catalog is pretty varied at times. But man, when they put out a ripper of a record, no pun intended, like they put out a great fucking record. Like there's a period of time between like, I don't know, this came out in 76. So like between this record and like 84, just unfuckwithable records there.
And that we'll definitely get into that. I mean, this band, for the most part, with some exceptions, have like progressively gotten heavier and heavier with like each release. Still putting out records to this day that, ended up on, the newest one ended up on the Decibel Top 40.
Dude, Firepower from a few years ago? That record was great.
Yeah. Still doing it for the love of the game. Swindle mentioned British Steel. That was my introduction to this band. I don't even think I was at a point in time where I like knew what heavy metal was. I had British Steel. I had two records exactly. It was British Steel and Somewhere in Time, Iron Maiden. So I had those two records. My brother and I listened to them both incessantly. I probably learned most of the riffs on British Steel because they're just really great, straightforward kind of hard rock metal songs. I would play like Grinder all the time, like on guitar. It's just like maybe a few chords, but I had a Walkman to listen to that. I would say British Steel is a pretty, maybe even kind of has a lot of like pop sensibilities, and we'll kind of get onto that with this record because there's certainly elements of that from the beginning of this band. I may have gotten turned on to Sad Wings of Destiny because of Dave Mustaine, because I had already experienced British Steel, Screaming for Vengeance, and some of the kind of classic records of this band's discography. But the original era I was not very familiar with. And then there's like a moment within the Behind the Music where Dave Mustaine's like, I got my ass kicked by my stepdad because I played Sad Wings of Destiny, and he considered it like a blasphemous record. I'm like, I don't think I'd ever heard that. And like something in me changed from like the opening few moments of this record, and we'll certainly get into it. But I think this is mostly a pretty perfect record. I love it. There's definitely some things I will say maybe could be better or taken out of the record, but for the most part, it is like a pretty classic record of this band's discography.
With the Mustaine tie in there, like now that you say that, listening to this record and knowing his output of what his band has done, it's like, oh yeah, it's there 100%. That there's a certain style of writing that he has that owes a lot to some of the sounds on this record and some of the kind of riff structures on this record and everything. So also with this record, I wasn't familiar with this record really until I listened to it a handful of years ago. I kind of stuck with the classic records, or kind of the more known records, I guess you could say. So like Stained Class, British Steel, Screaming for Vengeance, Painkiller, Sin After Sin, I always thought was really cool as well. But I wasn't as familiar with this record. I knew the artwork. I knew like the track The Ripper was on here. But there's some pretty interesting shit on here too that I can't wait to really dig in and discuss.
I think whereas like Sabbath obviously gets credited with, basically inventing the genre, they've never once considered themselves to be a metal band. This is perhaps the first band that leaned into, we're a metal band, like, true and true. Like, this is what we are. I'm not going to like mince words or like say that we're a hard rock band or whatever. Like, we define ourselves, we identify ourselves as a metal band. However, these first two records, I don't know if you could necessarily call it that. I think there are elements of where this band was going, even from the first record. But like, man, that first record is more or less like a blues rock record.
Oh yeah, like absolutely. I mean, even in title and in theme and vibe and everything, like it's all there. It is 100% wearing their influences on their sleeves. It sounds like British blues rock. It sounds like early American blues rock. Even even on this record alone, like I can hear some weird Chuck Berry kind of like early blues rock influences to this. Really kind of strange question here for everybody here. I know we all kind of started listening to heavier and harder music at different points in time and in different eras. I found it very difficult as a younger person to, especially starting out hearing something as extreme as like a Cannibal Corpse really early on, to sometimes go back and listen to those older records, right? Because I think you kind of have to grow a little bit and go, okay, I need to go back and hear this because I need to know where my influence is pulled from, right? I need to know where the songwriting aspect of it came from. I need to be able to appreciate that more. And I think being able to appreciate that more helps you love these older records a lot more, because when you're hearing something that's coming at you at 280 BPMs, it's blast beats, it's all this other stuff, or it's even like Battery or something like that, it's kind of hard to go backwards sometimes. But when you start to truly realize like, oh, this stuff came from something else, I have to go back and hear it a little bit. We'd all heard the singles from this band on the radio, VH1, MTV2, whatever it was. And, we knew those, Guitar Hero helped out with a little bit of that, I'm sure. And, but then you start to go back to these classic records and you start to open up a little bit more. And that's where, you and I have talked about Thin Lizzy, and you kind of go into there and go, what did this band influence?
So I would say from my personal experience, I started here. So like I started here, gradually got into heavier shit. I don't know, Swindle or CJ definitely kind of the outlier here, maybe a little bit. I don't know if and where this comes into play at all.
I mean, I was like obsessed with the band Europe for a while. So that was probably my like going back move. I wasn't like well versed in music. I was not on the internet seeking stuff out like you guys were. So I just randomly fell into Europe because of watching the movie Hot Rod. That whole soundtrack is Europe.
Yes.
And I just loved that band for a long time. And then, yeah, what Dylan said, I probably heard Breaking the Law the first time on one of those like VH1 best of shows. That was probably the first time I heard that song.
Those are, for all the goofy shit with some of those like series, like I love the blank decade.
Yeah.
Like they were kind of pivotal in making me understand things that really they're kind of pointless information about the pet. But now I know like all about Alf for some reason. And like,
you need Andy Dick to teach you these things.
It's true. Yeah.
It's the only way you're going to learn.
Danny Bonaducci talks about, like the light bright. I know it now. Thanks.
I just remember Ashanti talking about LA Gear shoes. That's all I remember.
Yep. Swindle.
I think it would have been probably better for me to have heard like Judas Priest or Iron Maiden when I was getting into like metal, probably. Instead, I like fucking listened to the Ramones and the Clash and shit, and I was like, I think this is what I'm into.
Yeah. But you say that, but like we have also spent many nights, even like early on into us meeting each other, like listening to like the whole like Holy Diver record, like in my kitchen or something.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's some of it there. Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why my dad did like some shit and didn't like some shit. He also didn't really, I never heard him listen to Iron Maiden once. But he liked fucking Led Zeppelin and Dio. That's the only reason I heard that shit. And Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, although he thinks that that's the same band. He just refers to everything Ozzy Osbourne was ever involved with as Ozzy.
Yeah,
even though
I've met those people.
He didn't write any of it.
Yeah, it's very fucking true. It's, we've mentioned Iron Maiden twice on here, and off air we've talked. I love certain eras of Iron Maiden a lot. Respect to them. A lot of influence from that band. I think I like this band so much more than I do Maiden. And that's not a slight. I love the Somewhere Back in Time record. I love Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, Power Slave. I love those early Iron Maiden records, that first era. But something about the consistency of this band and how, as you hit it, they progressively got heavier as opposed to getting more progressive and more kind of thought-provoking. You listen to like Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It's Shakespeare, right? Like it's every so often, I just want to hear thick, thudding fucking riffs, right? And I think we can all agree to that. Like Priest has a litany of those. They also have, pretty intricate parts. Like you look at a later era album like Painkiller, right? That's thrash metal almost. And just something about those early riffs, and obviously that's where new wave of British heavy metal came from, was the Priest and Maiden influence going on there, and Motorhead you could kind of throw in there with more of the punks, and it was just something about this band hit more on a guttural level, like just kind of in the gut as well. And Maiden was more like, all right, I got to think about this a little bit more. I have to actually pay attention. There's a 9-minute song called Phantom of the Opera I really got to pay attention to. Whereas this, it's like, oh, yeah, that's just a great riff, and the vocalist is hitting notes I never thought existed.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And I mean, they're kind of one of the last of that era. Like they're probably the not a few of these kind of like OG dudes left at this point, and this band still being out there and touring is pretty insane. But I do feel like we should get back to maybe their roots, kind of a brief history here. Black Sabbath, obviously from Birmingham, England, not the only band from that area that would go and make strides in this form of music. Judas Priest essentially formed in 1969 with two key members. We have Ian Hill and Ken Downing Jr., better known as KK Downing. They were basically longtime childhood friends and schoolmates. They had a like kind of shared love for a lot of like the 60s kind of blues, like John Mayall, like tons of those bands that were going on during like that 60s British like blues kind of era. KK Downing also especially very influenced by Jimi Hendrix. I think like all of the interviews that I've looked up during, kind of the origins of this band, kind of how they started, he always mentions Jimi Hendrix to some degree. So they form a band called
Freight.
They quickly get a drummer by the name of John Ellis, and they kind of have like I don't know like exactly the exact lineup changes of this early, because it seems like they always kind of have like a revolving door of like drummers at this point, but they do need a vocalist, and so they kind of recruit Al Atkins, who was in another band called Judas Priest, and that band broke up, so he was in the market for a new band, and so he essentially joins
Freight.
but he kind of basically persuades his new band to take the old band's name, and thus you have the Judas Priest, or at least the beginnings of the Judas Priest we know today. And I always think it's funny, some of the folk tie-ins with this band, and I'll definitely mention a few later on, but Judas Priest was allegedly taken from the Bob Dylan song The Ballad of Frankie Lee and Judas Priest, which is from his 8th album, John Wesley Harding, in 1967.
I had to pull that track up to hear it, just to go, all right, I got to hear where this came from. I already knew what to expect. So, it's playing, and Lauren walked in the room, my girlfriend, and was like, what the fuck are you listening to? She's like, normally it's just some sort of inhumane sounding thing you're listening to, but that just sounds like an old man. She goes, is that Bob? I go, yes, it's him. It is he. Yes, I understand, but this is how this band was named, apparently.
Another Jimi Hendrix tie-in is that's the original album that All Along the Watchtower's on.
That's right. Oh shit. Damn.
Been a lot of Hendrix talk the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. It's all there.
Yep.
There's all through line.
Also, I'll Be Your Baby Tonight is a banger that's on that album. Let's stop talking about Judas Priest and talk about John Wesley Harding by Bob Dylan.
No, I didn't do my homework for that one.
Oh, you mean not Bruce Springsteen? Bruce Springsteen?
You mean pre-Bruce Springsteen? Bruce Springsteen?
You mean not Bruce Springsteen? Bruce Springsteen? All right.
No, pre-Bruce Springsteen.
No. I'm right.
He's gonna hit him.
I'm Dirty Dan. Oh, I'm Dirty Dan. All right, so they recorded a couple demos during this period. They played a fuck ton of shows as well in the local area, opening for bands like Budgie and Slade.
That's fucking wild.
Yeah, I mean, but you got to remember, we kind of talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
This band was not the leather clad spikes wearing band that they were in their classic era. They were wearing like these flowing hippie shirts, and they had the long hair. Yes. Yeah. I mean, during the Rocka Rolla era that we'll get to, I mean, you see like a BBC live performance where it's like wild. It is unlike when it's hard to avoid, breaking the law. And then you kind of dive deeper into this band and you get to that like performance and you're like, this, what? Like, where did this come from?
You referenced Budgie so much in the doc, and I have no fucking clue who that band is. And then by like the 10th time I read, like also worked with Budgie, I was like, what does that have to do with anything?
They're kind of
crash
like
course in brain surgery.
Yeah. They're kind of calling later was Metallica covered them on Garage Days Revisited, and the huge influence there, huge influence on like the new wave of British heavy metal. They're kind of like this blues rock, hard rock 3-piece from the area that were probably really big at the time, like very influential in their day, and then just kind of got forgotten of. And Budgie's like a bird, and so like all of their records kind of have like weird bird. Like I think there's one in particular that always makes me laugh, that it almost looks like the Planet of the Apes with the guns on the horses, but it's like they're like bird heads or whatever.
I know the one.
It's so fucking great.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
Because the weird thing about Budgie is that the vocals are really high.
Yes.
Like the vocal range is increasingly high.
It's very,
almost like nasally Geddy Lee.
Yeah, it's very Rush-esque for sure.
Yeah.
Check it out. If you haven't listened to it and you're listening to this, I highly recommend diving into some of those records. But so they were playing with acts like that, some of the glam rock stuff in the area. Yeah, Bread Fan, great track. So at one point during this era, like 71, early 70s, drummer Alan Skipmore joins the band for a very, very brief period of time.
What's Alan Moore known for, Dylan?
Man, he's known for
Swamp
the great
Thing.
Batman, Swamp Thing, Batman, Daredevil, Like, you fucking name it. Man,
Same
he had
guy.
a great career once he left this band.
Yep.
They were
Yes.
I read
Holding
a
that
lot of
shit back.
comics. I read a lot of comics to prepare for this, and then turns out different guy.
What an idiot.
Yeah.
The famed comic book writer Alan Moore was held back by joining Judas Priest. What could have been if had he not left and started writing the funny papers.
His time in the band influenced the Watchmen. That's why the Watchmen happened.
His beard could be even bigger by now if he had just went straight to comics.
So with all that said, he brief stint in the band early on, like he was basically he left pretty quickly due to some financial problems and was replaced by Chris Congo Campbell. And even in early 1973 as well, Al Atkins also leaves the band due to financial issues. He was like kind of described as an older member of the band. He was like the only guy who was married and had kids. So it's like, hey, I'm not really making a ton of money as is. It doesn't seem like we're going to get the record contract. Maybe like we're trying to chase like stardom. Doesn't look like it's happening. Like, hey, maybe I should like take a step back and I don't know, take care of my family.
Maybe you shouldn't have had kids.
That's true. I mean, you got to think too. A lot of these guys didn't come from. They lived in industrial ass Birmingham, England, like
post World War II.
Right.
Industrial Birmingham, England.
Right. So everything, every time you watch like a documentary on like Sabbath or like this kind of era of music, I mean, like it is just a very bleak and poverty stricken place to live. So hey, maybe I could work in a factory somewhere and be able to make some money to eat, bread sandwiches or something like that. I don't think the band's really going to pan out. So
bread sandwiches.
I gotta feed my children.
Jesus. Oh man, Swindle already talking shit. So yeah, and then like not long after Al leaves, Chris leaves too. So they lose their drummer again. And so with that, the band almost breaks up. But at the time, Ian Hill was dating his then girlfriend and future ex-wife, Sue Halford, who suggested that maybe her brother would join the band. And I think Ian was over there one day and heard him sing. They apparently, Ian always says like, Rob was singing like Ella Fitzgerald, KK was singing Doris Day. Apparently that wasn't the case. He doesn't remember what he was singing, but whatever was happening maybe in his bedroom, Ian and KK were like, we got to get Rob to join our group.
Nobody knew.
No, yeah,
no,
right.
Nobody knew.
You hear that all the time, though.
Just singing Doris Day.
Maybe. I don't know. He says otherwise, but I think it's funny,
Yeah.
Where you're like dating someone and they're like, you should ask my brother to join. I'm like, I don't want to, what? Like, fucking, why? Like, who would, maybe that gets presented and you're like, why would I don't want to just because he's your brother, but dude had pipes.
Yeah.
He had, sorry.
I was just going to say, it's just always that, like, I don't know him.
Yeah.
I don't know that guy.
Excuse me, he's singing Doris Day right now.
Well,
allegedly.
But he had like maybe seen the band before with Al Atkins on vocals, and I think he kind of mentions like, I saw him at a college, somewhere in the local area, and like there was something there, like they have potential, and so that's kind of always in the back of his mind. I think basically Rob was already in a band called Hiroshima with a drummer by the name of John Hinch on drums, and so when he's asked to join the band, he brings his drummer along, and so then you're able to kind of continue forth from there.
What a name for that band.
Yep.
Why? What happened?
Rocka Rolla happened.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe it didn't.
Maybe it didn't. Yeah, so 73 as well, like you get your drummer, you get your vocalist, and they signed to this label by the name of Gull. They basically get to work on their debut record. Gull Records, Gull, is a defunct UK label from that existed from 74 to 84, started by Derek Everett, Monty Babson, and David Howells. They were distributed by Decca, and then in the U.S. for a brief stint of time, they were also distributed by Motown Records.
Oh my God. Quincy.
Yep.
Rip.
Yeah. Could you imagine?
Big rip. Yep.
Like just, hey, there's the Jackson 5, and also here's this random Judas Priest record. So they are offered £2,000 for the record. Basically nothing, as far as I can tell. I don't know what the exchange rate on that is. And then to go back and think 1973. But given like a shoestring budget to do this record. So they recorded at Olympic, Trident, and Island Studios in London between June and early July 1974. So this was like, from what I understand, a pretty predominant studio in the area. But again, they didn't have any money, so they were sleeping in a van outside of the studio. And so then they would wait until like the night shift because the rates were cheaper. And so they would have like meal tickets that they could go and, eat at the cafeteria or something like that. But yeah, sleeping in the van outside. What I noticed from a lot of these first two records is that the label basically had like a bunch of people like on staff that they would just kind of like, whether or not they had any sort of hard rock or metal kind of history, they're like, that's our guy, so you're going to use him. And so they basically get Roger Bain, who did produce the first 3 Black Sabbath records and also some Budgie records. But I don't know if, other than that, I don't even, who knows what he would, if he understood what he had at the time. I mean, those Black Sabbath records are fantastic, but
a lot of labels did that early on too, like especially the smaller labels. I think Earache actually had a period of time that they were doing that. Metal Blade had a producer that was just their guy for a period of time. And if you read Slagle's book, like he kind of goes into discussion about that individual who ended up becoming a pretty good producer. Basically, he would get called in if a band didn't have somebody lined up. Metal Blade would go, this is the guy, this is who we have.
Right, and that isn't Earache's guy Colin Richardson?
I think at one point he was.
Yeah, he did like all the Bolt Thrower records and all that shit. What were you saying, Swindle?
By the way, £2,000, 1973 to dollars now is $38,187.
Okay.
Still for a recording budget back then, though, for like
for a
big band
studio,
like this,
I guess.
big studio, when you're paying like big studio money back then. Yeah.
And then
whereas now it's like
management and 5 people, maybe.
And,
I don't know.
And the band's for sure getting the shit into the stick on that one.
One of the things I read that the label wanted was the band to thicken their sound a little bit. So they were like, hey, you need to, I think there was an article that said maybe, all right, you got to get a keyboard player or you got to get a horn section for this record. So they opted for the second guitar player, who, of course, Glenn Tipton, the twin guitar attack between KK Downing and Glenn Tipton. He was in a band called the Flying Hat Band, who were like apparently competitors of Judas Priest at the time. And so that band was basically on the outs, and because of their management or what have you, they were basically done. And so I think word got around that, Glenn was available, and KK and various members of the band, including their manager, went over and then kind of like tried him out. So they brought him in basically during the recording of Rocka Rolla, their first record.
So Gull almost had this band sounding like Chicago.
Yeah.
Bring in a horn section.
I was going to say Judas Priest could have been the greatest ska band of all time.
Right. Yeah.
But, you got to think too, one of the things that kind of stands out about this record, and maybe why it sounds the way it does, even with all of these kind of like heavy hitters, is that, I'm sure Glenn had some input on how the guitar would sound on, portions of the record, but you're kind of coming into someone else's band and the songs are probably mostly all written. Rob Halford being a pretty newer member of the band. I mean, he literally joined like a year before this record was released. A handful of songs on this record they're credited to Al Atkins as well. KK has pretty much songwriting credits on the whole thing, but yeah, you essentially have like a lot of newcomers. These are maybe songs that not everyone has sat with together, so they haven't like learned or like had much time to write together as like this unit.
Right. It's just what they had at that point. That's really what it is. With a lot of first records, like it's just kind of what you have. You don't really have time to fine tune a lot of stuff, especially during this era of music. It's just get it out, put it out. It's a product kind of thing.
Yeah. And one other comment on, the label, again, you have like a guy who worked for the label at the time, who's like the artist. And you have like that kind of now famous artwork where it stands out because it's just nothing like I've ever seen on a Judas Priest record, where it's like a spoof of the Coca-Cola bottle cap and it just says Rocka Rolla on it and like a logo for the band that they've like never used again. But I believe I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but it's John Pash or John Pache. He's a British graphic designer and art director that worked for Gull, but he also worked with Budgie, of course. He also worked on the first Armored Saint record, which I thought was hilarious, but he's probably best known for designing the Rolling Stone logo with the lips and the tongue. Like this is the guy who did that very famous, iconic logo.
I know that logo.
Hell yeah.
It's famous.
Yep. It's famous.
I know that one.
The band, not stoked on the album artwork. Really not stoked with the album itself. The production of this record was kind of infamous, and the reception for the record was pretty lukewarm, to put it lightly. But yeah, they just had always commented like, Roger had worked on some pretty big records, and I'm sure he's a great producer, but for whatever the band was trying to achieve, I think they felt like they did not quite capture the live performance on the record. I wouldn't call it a bad record, but it's definitely more sparse and a lot less like cutting and driving than what you would get on this record where we're talking about today, and definitely some of the later stuff. I listened to they actually remixed and remastered the record last year for its 50th anniversary, and it sounds really great. But I mean, this is not like the Judas Priest that
right.
For sure.
You're making the album sound better, right? But it's not going to change what the material is by any means. It is still very much a blues rock record from England at this point. Kind of a no-name, kind of nameless band at this point in time, with a little bit of material that they wanted to put out. I mean, just seeing some of the song titles in here, it definitely seems very much like, yep, brand new band, brand new song titles. I will say seeing something like Caviar and Meths stands out pretty well.
Yeah.
But it's the little bit I have listened to of that record. It's like, okay, I get it. Every band has a starting point. I mean, you look at the first Thin Lizzy record, it's a psych rock record.
Yeah.
It's not what they were to become. They were kind of a psych rock band at that point.
Yeah. There's even like some psychedelic elements on this first record. I mean, it's just weird. It's like kind of, again, there are definitely things that I hear where I'm like, okay, I can see that this turns into that. I can connect the dots, but it just doesn't come anywhere close to some of the other records for sure. But because of this record and because of the reception and the way it sounded, they made some very like, all right, we got to be a little bit more involved with the decision making on the next record. We got to like, something has to change. We got to get better. And so thus you have Sad Wings of Destiny, their sophomore record, released on March 23rd, 1976 through Gull Records. This is their second and final album for the label, which we will get to. But two significant changes occurred before making the record. One, they were like, we're not going to work with Roger again. That's just not going to happen. We need to go in another direction production-wise. And they did. On paper, I don't know if it was the record sounds great in my opinion, but on paper, it kind of like, oh, you might be making another mistake here with the guys that Gull ultimately picked, because they, of course, recommended two other producers that were connected to the label. You have Jeffrey Calvert and Max West, who are not known for their rock credibility whatsoever. Jeffrey had worked at a studio by the name of Morgan Studios in London, which was connected to the Gull, but they were both members of a UK pop and disco group called Typically Tropical, and they had a hit single in the summer of 1975 with the song titled Barbados. They also would later write another disco hit by Sarah Brightman, I Lost My Heart to a Starship Trooper, which, again, just nothing anywhere connected to this at all. But yeah, Goal suggested that they work with them, and so they went with it. And there is, however, one engineer that is connected to this group that will come up later as far as like metal production and even some of the later Priest records. Chris Sangerardis, I hope that's how you pronounce it. Again, if not, I apologize. But he basically got his big break working on this record. He was like a guy who worked in the studio Rockfield in Wales, and he KK says that maybe he heard a solo being played, and he was like, I want to like work whatever I can do to be like an assistant engineer on this record. I want to do it. But Chris would ultimately work with bands like Anvil, Bruce Dickinson, Exodus, Girl School, King Diamond, Thin Lizzy, Tigers of Pantang, and eventually would also return to work as the producer of Painkiller in 1990 as well. But this was like, he was like 21 at the time and getting to work with kind of this young new band, Judas Priest. So I did find that pretty interesting as well. But Rockfield Studios in Wales, like I mentioned, they recorded this kind of during the winter months, it kind of into the next year. This is like a residential recording studio. So I believe they got to kind of stay and write and make this record over a period of time, but they also did not have a lot of money. So they really couldn't, go out and feed themselves very much during this time. But, I believe maybe the studio also housed like Black Sabbath and UFO at a certain time, but Rockfield Studios, that's where we're recording here as well.
What's the deal with Gull? Do y'all know anything about this record label?
Not much. All I know is that, it's just a small label that, maybe someone else can hip us to that. I really don't know much. It was only around for 10 years. Somehow had like ties to Decca and Motown. It's pretty weird.
I like looked it up. They don't have like a discography on fucking Wikipedia. And I looked at, I don't know, some record collectors websites, and there were only like five or six releases by Gull on this website. Like, it just seems like the people that ran Gull, like, were trying to merely treat this band as a business, being like, you're going to have this many members and you're going to record with this, like, this producer, and like, that doesn't work with any other artists that sound anything like you. And like, it is no wonder to me that they didn't last for very long. Like,
very early music business shit.
Maybe there's a reason the music business is dead.
I mean, everything's still wanting to function like it did in the fucking 70s and 60s and 80s. It's impossible.
Yeah. This record label is very much like, just based off of what I read and how I'm interpreting it, is like, if we could pay you less, we would. Like, they paid him again another like £2,000 to record this record. And, again, they just became more involved, I think, with their experience from the first one on what little they were able to, have as resources. I will say, though, one other thing that really sticks out to me about this record is the fucking artwork.
Mm-hmm.
I love the artwork way more than the first record. CJ, what is your interpretation of Sad Wings of Destiny when you first saw that artwork?
It's like a dang angel.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
with some sad wings.
Dang, of Destiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you? I was gonna ask what you think those wings are made out of.
Okay. Probably like feathers or something. But I don't know. Yeah, it's like an angel in hell.
Yeah, I mean, I bought this record.
Oh, there it is.
When I was a young man at Kiss the Sky Records, and I think they were in Geneva at the time, Geneva, Illinois. And seeing this cover for the first time was like pretty, like, as a fucking 12-year-old kid or 13-year-old, as a youth, you're kind of blown away by it. I mean, yeah, there's flames engulfed all over it. There's this angel. You also get the first sign of the Judas Priest trident on the album cover as well. But yeah, Picking that out of the record store for the first time was pretty incredible, and I've just always loved the way it looks.
You ain't supposed to be there, Angel. You're supposed to be in heaven. What are you doing down there?
Damn.
It really makes you think.
The album artwork was created by Patrick Woodroffe, who is a English artist, etcher, and drawer. I did a lot of like science fiction work, but he also worked with bands like Budgie. And so there you go.
I was just going to say that looked like a Woodroffe.
Yeah, right. When you see a Woodroffe, you just fucking know it, you know?
Right, yeah.
Murder.
So they worked on this record for like a handful of months. They took breaks occasionally. I think they basically finished up in July of 1975, I think I read. But you really have pretty much the same group of guys. However, one of the second major changes, you lose John Hinch from previously, who was on the first record, and you have the return of famous comic book writer and drummer Alan Moore. And I think they really just felt like his musicianship could, be put to the task to kind of elevate the band on the next record. So they brought him back into the fold. You also see the songwriting kind of get stronger, which I'm sure we'll touch on.
Absolutely.
And really it is just because the guys are getting more familiar with each other. They are able to write more. This is kind of the first iteration where you have the songwriting duo of basically, Downing, Tipton, and Halford, which kind of persists through a large portion of this band's career. There's only 3 songs that share that writing partnership: Genocide, Island of Domination, and Deceiver. Victim of Changes, also written by the 3, but you have to give that also songwriting credit to Al Atkins, the band's former lead singer as well. They kind of say that song is made up of a couple different tracks. Whiskey Woman, which I guess was like a pre-Halford Judas Priest song, pre-Halford Judas Priest song with Al Atkins, and then Red Light Lady, which I guess was like a song that was written during Hiroshima. There's kind of some conflicting statements on that. I don't know for sure, like, if they just kind of sandwiched those 2 songs together. Rob says that the song was always titled Victim of Changes, but Al does receive a songwriting credit on here. So there's definitely something from that era. So you essentially have Glenn Tipton on guitars, piano, and backing vocals, KK Downing on guitars, Ian Hill on bass, Alan Moore on drums, and Robert Halford on vocals. Let's get into the tracks on the record. Before we really take it track by track, I do want to say that there is this weird thing with Gull again, where the track list is kind of fucked up, because the album itself, a lot of people know now, it starts with Victim of Changes. But if you look on the record, which I do have a Gull copy of this record, it starts with Prelude, which would make sense, right? Why wouldn't it start with a song like that? And that's essentially the way the album was going to start. The B-side was intended to be the start of the record, and Victim of Changes was going to be the second half of the record. But for whatever reason, Gull decided to kind of flip-flop them, but they must not have had enough money to change the sleeves of the actual record. Because I looked at the vinyl itself. On the A side, it starts with Victim of Changes, but again, on the back, it starts with Prelude. It's fucking.
They don't have any money left. They already gave the band £2,000.
I mean,
they're broke.
At this point, that label, if they had to give that band 50 cents more, they'd get a fucking job, dweebs. They weren't spending any more goddamn money. They're just we gave you the money we're going to give you. Figure it out, fucko.
Judas Priest probably showed up to the record label address, and there wasn't anything there. It was just a cardboard box that had fallen over.
What's the CJ, do you remember that Malcolm in the Middle where Hal gets courted by some job and he goes back the next day to decline, but the entire building's gone?
The whole floor is disappeared.
Yeah. They just up and left like they never existed. Love it. But yeah, so which, definitely brings me to my first question. Maybe I really do feel like Victim of Changes is a really strong opener, but does it make more sense to have the instrumental prelude kind of open the record thinking back. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I actually, when I listen to this, like there are countless albums that we've talked about that are like just like a grind album or a thou album where there's an instrumental track in the middle, dead middle of the record to like break up really, really fast or really heavy songs and like give you a second to breathe before you go into the next song. But it like there's only Dreamer Deceiver is like really slow and mostly acoustic. And then there's only one song and then there's the instrumental track. When I was listening, I was like, I didn't need this. Like I didn't need this like moment to catch my breath because there was only one fast song.
It's got poor sequencing. I think the album has poor sequencing. Victim of Change does work as an intro track, but I think it has poor sequencing. I think Prelude could have been the intro with that work, but it is, there's even with the proposed A-side being the A-side, it's kind of weird because, when we get into it, like there's really only one awesome track on that A-side, that old A-side to me. And it's like, if it at least if that's the A-side, it goes from Prelude to Tyrant, and Tyrant's a great like banger of a track. So like you get that kind of calm and then the storm.
Yeah. It would have been interesting to hear it. Like I do think it would work better as an intro and then kind of like escalate into my favorite side of the record is like the front half. So to like build and get there and then have that experience, it would be interesting to, listen to the record that way. But this is essentially what we got. So
I think if they needed Prelude, like I think if Prelude wasn't going to be the open of the album, it shouldn't have been on the album. Like, or if they needed like music to fill space on the wax, like put it at the end and don't call it Prelude.
Yeah,
just use
like
it as what's the oh god, it's on what's the Sabbath bit? It's like it's not fairies wear boots. Rat Salad, right? Isn't that kind of like a just a solo section of a song? Right. Yeah. It's just like, use it like that, in that vein, because you've already got like Dreamer Deceiver and Deceiver, which it in its own right kind of sounds like a reprise of Dreamer Deceiver.
CJ.
Yes.
First impression, having no knowledge of this band, having no knowledge of what this record might sound like, what was your first thought when Victim of Changes comes on?
I definitely agree. It's a great opening track. Now that you guys have like mentioned it, Prelude makes sense to be the opener and then lead into that. That makes it. I listened to it and saw Prelude in the middle, and I was like, that's odd. But yeah, no, Victim of Changes is a really great opening track. So I can't really like. It would be different if it just didn't work as an opening track. It would be different, but it's fine. They, things got a little mixed around, but it still works.
Yeah, I mean, again, having no knowledge of like, the ins and outs of like the label fucking with quite literally everything. Hearing that kind of like the fade in of the guitars and just the way it fucking explodes when the rest of the band comes in. I mean, it is a statement, and maybe it wasn't meant to be. It is a statement for an 8-minute track to be the opener of a record, and it doesn't feel like a fucking slog to me personally. But
yeah, you're right. You're right though. The first few seconds, like you hit play and it's just nothing. And you're like, I did like a double glance at my phone. Like, is this on? Like, what's happening?
Yeah. It takes a solid 5 seconds for it to even come up in volume for you to even begin to hear it. Yeah. And the way it does fade in is really cool because once that fade in happens, you never return to that. Like it's purely kind of just this orchestrated intro, which reminded me of a Spirit Adrift track, Right Into the Light. has that same style intro, which I'm sure, that's kind of a homage to that. But, you get this great kind of early layered intro. You have this great layered intro with these guitars and this kind of fade in. And then you have this just great blues hard rock riff that kicks right in.
It's so, it's got like everything that I love about this band, where it's like there's the chugging aspect of it, but then they'll like do this like kind of melodic kind of scale run with it. And it's very forward moving. You just get all these little twists and turns. And then when fucking Rob kicks in and like hits all of the highs, like I love, like he has all of that on the first record to a degree. You can tell like, okay, he's not quite there, but I do feel like this is like the first instance for me personally where like, oh, he figured it out. Like this whole record.
This is the first record he sounds like Halford. He's not quite to kind of that metal god thing yet, right? Like that's a completely different version of his voice. But he's found his niche. This is like going from Kill 'Em All to Ride the Lightning, right? This is that kind of vocal maturity that's happened and like getting to know yourself a little bit more. He is hitting notes like that. I mean, this isn't studio processing at this time. He's hitting all this shit and probably doing numerous takes of it at a time to get all this. I mean, vocal layering, overdubs, all sorts of stuff on this. There is some wild shit that he does vocally kind of throughout the whole album. I personally think he's the standout on the album. Overall, like the band is still really finding itself. They've got a firm footing with this record, and with this track, you kind of get this. You get a lot of what's to come. Yeah, to me, this track does feel like two songs sandwiched together because you do get this almost borderline stop dead center, and it goes on to a different style of a song. But you've got great riffs in here. You've got a riff at like 1 minute and 46 seconds that would have been one of the better riffs on the later Black Sabbath records. You've got kind of these great lyrical prose that I think we can all kind of identify with. The line that sticks out to me the most is "Realize you're getting old." Hold on. Realize you're getting old and no one seems to care. I thought that was fucking great. There's falsettos all over this fucking track.
And you say that, but like, I always interpret falsettos to be like, it's like that vocal technique that allows you to hit shit higher, easier. Right. But I think he is just full on hitting that note. He is. Yep. And I've always heard even Phil say the same thing. That's right. Where he's Cowboys like, from Hell. You think he's doing the falsetto, but he is like actually going to that extent.
Going to the note.
Yeah.
And it's, and for lack of a better word, I am going to refer to it as a falsetto on this record.
It's fine.
At this point. But it's a great fucking track. I know Swindle had found like, heard some early Metallica kind of stylings on this track. Am I right with that?
Yeah, that like, it's kind of in just like the verse riff, the like single note picks, but especially the like walk down guitar part that goes into the first verse reminded me of Seek and Destroy by Metallica.
That kind of chromatic.
Yeah.
And it would be amiss to not think that those guys were not influenced by this era of this band at all.
You mean
yeah,
remiss?
I know. I get it. I say words that don't mean shit. I get it. Let's just fucking roll through it. Anyway,
I do want to point out the drum performance on this particular song's fucking great too. Holding the foundation, some great fills. I also love how it's like accentuated by like some of the like the riff and the drum hits. Like they kind of have this like very they played it out. They knew exactly what they wanted to do with some of like the beats and like some of the vocal deliveries here. The cadences, I guess, like you could say. There is a solo on every track on this record, so there's definitely going to be one or two on this one as well. And then you get kind of what we've alluded to with like the second part of the song where it kind of brings it way down.
Before we get into the second half of this track, there is a riff at around 4 minutes, 20 seconds. That sounds like a 90s Metallica track. Like a like that kind of Load era riff, that more blues centric riff. And I heard that and went, yep, there's no way that wasn't just in the Rolodex of influence. But that stop, go on with the second half of this, because I have a really weird take on what this second portion sounds like to me.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of stop on a dime, and then it does like almost a scale run up that just kind of like floats away, like it just floats away, and then they kind of it's like just very sparse, and there's like he's like doing this vocal melody from like a much lower register. I mean, he will bring it back. You will get the riff. The main riff of the song will return towards the later part of the song as it ends. But yeah, you just kind of like close it out with like almost like a jammy kind of groove.
Sounds like the Doors. This whole second half sounds like the Doors to me.
Interesting.
The vibe of it, just the kind of very sparse, obviously that band had a keyboardist, organist, whichever. But you've got the bass kind of playing this very melodic kind of walking line over those guitar chords that are kind of passing in and out. It's just got that, it's kind of just got a really creepy vibe to it as well. Very melodramatic. And the bass kind of carries most of the back half of that song. And then you get these great big riffs and these, crazy phased out sounding solos at the end of this. And then the intro riff returns, and then you get the ending, which is this huge vocal sound.
Yeah.
With a lot of the tracks on this record, they kind of end with it ends with the vocal.
I could not listen to the end of this song without laughing. When he's just screaming no. No! I was just like
CJ?
When you got a voice like that, you gotta end every track just wailing.
They fucking know what was bringing the money in.
Yep.
What money?
No,
at that
nothing.
Point? Yeah.
Nothing was bringing the money in at this point.
Well, theoretically, it would bring in the money.
CJ, any thought? What were your thoughts on our second track, The Ripper?
Oh, The Rip! I love it.
Yeah.
I did some research.
God damn it.
Jack the Ripper was like this old English serial killer guy, right?
Yeah.
I think that's probably what they're referencing with this. And he's also in one of your favorite movies, Austin. He's in Shanghai Nights. He gets roundhouse kicked off the bridge in Shanghai Nights. That's Jack the Ripper. That's the guy.
You might miss it. It's super brief, but he is in
I remember it.
That fucking awful movie.
He's there.
Maybe the worst movie. Maybe one of the worst movie experiences I've ever seen.
No, they're in England.
They're in England. You know they're in England.
Because they tell you every 10 seconds.
Hey, kid, what's your name? Oh, the name's Charlie. Charlie Chaplin. The British guy from the movie.
I stood up and I clapped.
What was the like? They had to have the Big Ben scene. They had to have every possible thing that just Americans might think like Britain. Yeah. That's it.
Bad food, bad coffee. You got it.
Jackie Chan does a whole fight with an umbrella because it rains over there. It's all there. But yes, loved this track. Yeah, and just Judas Priest going after some classic serial killer kind of stuff just really fits them.
I would agree, and I would argue that this is for this record still kind of finding your sound. This is a classic Judas Priest track for me. Yep. This is like just Agreed. To a T. This is exactly what this band sounds like in some of the classic era of this band. That fucking where the song kind of like it's like phases in right out of the gate, and you get the palm muted kind of twin guitar like melody of this song. I loved learning how to play this when I was like first starting out on guitar. You get the Halford scream, and then there's like this I don't know, it is like a the one thing that always like really stuck out to me about this band in particular was like how menacing and like evil this band can sound at times. Like this song is genuinely, when I heard it for the first time, like scary. Like it's a scary sounding track.
It's scary in the right way, but it also blends in the melodicism that the band does have, and it's like its sheath, right? You know, the way they kind of use this kind of standard sounding, standard for modern era, but this very kind of basic quarter note, kind of chugged rhythm, and just use that to move throughout the chord progression. It's fucking great, you know. Halford's vocals just kind of going along with that, kind of modulating that. It's just really fucking good. But there's a lot of really kind of, as you said, some menacing sounding stuff on this track. You know, there's kind of I don't know if you'd necessarily even call it the chorus or the pre-chorus, because it kind of builds upon that chorus section over the whole track. You know, you get it at like 45 seconds in, it's a little bit here or there, then it stops, then it goes back to, you know, this kind of these great fundamental rudimentary riffs that this band is known for. And then it goes to that chorus part, which has a very Ghost vibe, maybe something off of like the Opus record. There's some stuff on this track that makes me think of the first Danzig record, where it's very just raw sounding, bare bones.
I love the fucking tone of, well, I love their tone in general. Like it's very, I mean, they famously used Gibsons, probably some Marshalls as well. I mean, Glenn was a SG guy. KK was a Flying V as well. So I just always loved the way it sounded. There's not really, it doesn't really sound like there's a ton of effects necessarily on their playing. There might be
There's
a little
some
phaser
wah,
here
for
or
sure.
there.
Like a half cocked wah, like the Michael
Sure.
Schenker trick, for sure.
But for the most part, it's just, it's very like, especially when you get to that palm muted part, it's very just like right here. It feels like someone's kind of staring you right in the face.
Very, very middle, like kind of mid-range sounding, very right in the dead center of it. Each instrument has its own kind of sound, and each instrument is mixed as well as it could for this era. You can hear throughout the record kind of production, you know, inconsistencies. I do think left speaker guitar is way louder than right speaker guitar. Like the right side guitar is so low in the mix, it's crazy. Whereas like as soon as that left speaker kicks in, it's just almost overpowering everything at certain points. But that's just a gripe. It doesn't take away from the fact that you've got good songs on this record and you've got great playing on this record. I mean, the topic of this track, as CJ brought up, is, you know, kind of fodder for a lot of heavy bands, and Priest did a really good job with it. Second record in, great vocals on this track, some evil sounding guitar riffs at like a minute and a half in. That continues to modulate higher and higher and higher and higher, like chromatically, that I thought was really fucking cool. You know, there's points where the bass kind of really pushes the song forward. I mean, it's a great track. It's a classic fucking track from this era of the band.
I like the part, I wasn't expecting the drum, like after when the drums start in, I wasn't expecting them to be at like halftime. I thought they were going to be like faster than they were. So I was very surprised when the drums came in. I also like the like twin guitar thing after the guitar solo that like sounds super dissonant because they keep like changing keys or whatever. Yeah,
that's fucking great. I'm glad you brought up that guitar solo too. That guitar solo has the tone knob turned all the way down, or at least if it's not, the wah is like right at the top position, so its filter is fully on it, because it sounds it's not muffled, but it sounds like there's no high frequency to it at all.
One of my favorite parts, it also sounds kind of weird, but it sounds like an explosion or like kind of being in hell, where it's like it just full on. There's just like this burst that kind of goes towards like the back half of the song. But again, we just end on a wailing Halford scream before we just kind of cut out and go to the next one.
I mean, motherfucker was like, I'm hungry. I'm so cold.
Let's get a meat pie or whatever they eat over there.
Eel pie, right?
Sure. Put it in
eels and chops.
Bake it in a pie. It doesn't matter.
The the Ripper was chasing him the whole damn song, I'd be screaming too.
The riff does like sound like that. It feels like someone is that when the palm muting part, it does feel like somebody's just kind of tiptoeing and going around the corner or something.
You're listening to you got your headphones on, you're checking, like looking over your shoulder, like someone's behind me, aren't they? He's gonna get me.
There's a confidence and a swagger to this track that Victim of Change didn't have. I feel like when it opens out the gate, like, oh, this band is just, this is what we want this band to sound like. And it's just a new exploration of what this band is.
The acoustic ballad, CJ, Dreamer Deceiver. Thoughts on that?
I really did not like the transition from the Ripper to this to Dreamer Deceiver. It was just like, didn't work for me at all. I ended up enjoying the song somewhat, but that transition, it just kind of made me mad. I was like, we had such a, like it was such a classic Judas Priest song, and then going to this is just like, I'm just like, keep it moving. I don't care. Like I immediately kind of checked out from that going to such a slow song. Didn't work for me.
I could definitely tell where the like acoustic Metallica parts got their influence from when I heard the song. I was like, oh, I recognize this. I get this.
Those those acoustic classical guitars that are layered in there. Probably a little bit of stereo chorus on them as well. Throughout this track. That's kind of a trope from this era, is if you've got an acoustic, put reverb and chorus all the fuck over it. Just soup it the fuck up and make it sound weird. Make it sound kitschy.
What kind of soup?
Man, we talking about, I lost it. I'm gone. You know,
CJ, what kind of soup?
Stew, goulash, whatever.
Tortilla.
All right.
I like this track. I like this track. I like the creepy, kind of witchy, evil lyrics that Halford's got on this. He brings those back in another track as well, but that brought to mind, oh, that's right. Halford is like one of King Diamond's big influences. Like it's like, oh, fuck, right. Yeah, of course it's there. I like this track a lot. Yes, it is very formulaic of the time, 100%. It sounds like this era of bands, like hard rock bands, ballad. But there's some great kind of nuance throughout. You know, the verses are these really long, kind of played out things where the drum and bass are really holding the fundamental and grooving through. Just a great tool for Halford to sing all over and use the different range that he has.
He is the focal point of this track. Yeah.
He has got range all over it. The guitars are kind of more of a vibe kind of thing. It seems like very, very just kind of blues based, you know, chord progressions, minor chord progressions, that sort of thing. Arpeggiating those clean picked chords.
It'll do like, they hold the foundation. You basically ride with the same kind of riff or arrangement for most of it, but then they'll throw in like, kind of like, much like a blues turnaround, they'll throw in like a little ditty here just to kind of, here you go. This little neat little thing.
The solo at around 3.5 minutes has I heard it and I went, that's Clapton and Gilmore. Like that's this weird blending of that. Obviously that Jimi Hendrix influence kind of shines through with some of the kind of big dramatic kind of note choices and bends that he's using there. The back half of this, or that whole kind of section underneath the solo, Ian's bass playing is carrying that really well and doing a really good job. He knows what this band needs as a bass player. You know, he's still with the band. This band's been going hard for almost 60 years at this point. So
yeah, it's really, I mean, Halford, Glenn, and Ian have remained like as the consistent members of this band for all this time.
Obviously we got another track to come, but the fade out of this got me at the end of it, because there is a weird key change at the end of it. And I went, what the fuck is this piano doing? And then it's like, oh, it fades. I'm like, why are we going to this why are we going to major? What happened?
Yeah.
This isn't this type of band.
I like this track. I think it's cool. It, definitely fits well with, obviously Dreamer Deceiver. Then you get to Deceiver, like it's certainly like a theme or, thematic part, but you go from this kind of acoustic ballad to more of like a classic Judas Priest gallop, which, definitely we'll hear again and again. But I mean, it's like just a classic chug, and it cuts through really, really well. Again, these are not like, I feel like this band always spoke to me in a way where, like, I love Iron Maiden, of course, and they have like incredible songwriting chops, but sometimes, like we kind of talked about in Crowbar, like there's something to be said about just simplistic riffing and great chord structure, and like the way this band is able to convey emotion and feeling with just like a handful of chords, and it's all feel. Not to say they're bad guitar players by any means, because they know what they're doing clearly on guitar and how to use dynamics, but I feel like there's just something to be said about straightforward, simple songwriting.
I mean, you look at kind of different eras of this band. You look at a track like Electric Eye, right? That main riff of that track is just so quintessential, and it's driving. It's a lesson in downstrokes and everything. It's real simple. It's not like a crazy technical riff or anything. It's just a really well done, tasteful riff. Even I've mentioned Painkiller a couple times. That riff alone, very tasteful. Living After Midnight, Breaking the Law. Those are great riffs, and they're there for that reason. And this band, whereas like an Iron Maiden, yes, that band is pushing technical prowess to almost the progressive level, right? You look at like Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and it is as fucking progressive as you could get with that band.
Right. Yeah, it's just I think there's no one that sounds like those bands. You get a character of the person who is playing
absolutely
the ref.
100%.
CJ, what do you think of Deceiver?
I think it redeems Dreamer Deceiver for me. I think it was like it goes from the Ripper to Dreamer Deceiver. Didn't like that transition, but then once it goes into Deceiver, I'm like, okay, now I see your purpose, Dreamer Deceiver. I see why you're here. It worked for me, and then I enjoyed Deceiver. So that all like second listen, that all worked for me.
I really wish that Dreamer Deceiver was just called Dreamer and this was called Deceiver. Like that Dreamer Deceiver is like, God damn it, am I stuttering? Like am I like, do I have dyslexia all of a sudden? Like, what's going on? It's a great track. It does feel like a bit of a reprise a bit. It almost feels like a continuation of the track before it. Great opening riff. I think that opening kind of chug into that riff is just fucking it. This thing swings. The drums are great on this. Just pretty simple track. It's only like 2 minutes and some change long. It's got these great solos, got a Children of the Grave vibe. That solo is very Iommi-esque to my ears. This is where I really noticed that the left speaker, like the guitars, were just way louder than anything else on the track. It's just a really fun, quick track.
I thought the main riff of this song is probably a good first metal riff for someone to learn on guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like
absolutely
moderately paced, and it seems pretty simple. And you got that like triplet feel. So I think it also was a good like pace changer after the slow song, and kind of the thing that ties them together is at the very end of this song, that like acoustic riff from the song before comes back,
right,
to close out the album, right? That's the end of the.
That's it.
That's the end of it. That's the end of the album.
Yeah, it does get a little wonky from here, because like you said, it breaks up the album from like kind of like the heaviness, and then you also get like the slow part, and then now we're back into it a little bit, and now all right, we're kind of like being stopped in our tracks a little bit here with Prelude, which is the instrumental of the record, and you got all these like the piano and the synth and the organ and like the big I maybe like timpani kind of drum percussion elements of the song.
That is what it is.
So
it's 100%.
Yeah, a little jarring as a like interlude rather than a opening track.
Yeah, there's some cool like guitar swells going on in here too. it almost gets a little proggy, I think, for like this era of prog, like some Yes, Pink Floyd, etc. There's some like neoclassical influence to this track as well. But it's it would have been I think it would have been a cool opener.
Because I mean, think about it this way too. Like if you imagine this is the opening track, kind of setting the atmosphere, and then it quite literally punches straight into Tyrant, like nobody's fucking business. CJ,
favorite track on the record?
What do you think?
I'm gonna say the same thing. Tyrant's my favorite.
God damn, what a great track.
It's another like sounds like a classic Judas Priest song. You can't really beat that. Yeah, I don't know. It's the lyrics are great. It made me kind of want to be a tyrant. I don't think I would be. I don't think if I was given power, I would be a tyrant, but they make it seem really fucking cool to be a tyrant.
This is a weird song for Thou to cover.
Damn it, I was gonna say this was Thou would name the record after you.
It's, I mean, God, this is great intro riff. Fat, almost like distorted bass playing on this. Probably a tube amp pushed really hard. I mean, God, it is the Tyrant voices that are layered in kind of the chorus off on the left-hand side. I mean, God, it is a great fucking track. The choruses are great. The way they're the way the vocals are layered in the choruses. There's these, again, that kind of phased out, half-cocked wah kind of solo sound that fits in here. The great back and forth soloing that you finally get. That's the first instance on this record of that classic, like, Tipton and Downing kind of back and forth soloing thing that you've got.
I would say there's, so we've mentioned a few, like, influences on here. And, you know, we got Jimi Hendrix. You got, like, some of the more, like, you know, session guys, or like the guys who like went in front of their own blues rock bands of the you know, the 60s. One person, and this could be maybe more an instance of like maybe these two guitar players have just like shared influences, and I mean KK and Glenn Tipton, but this song to me sounds a lot like Deep Purple.
Yes, Highway Star. Yes,
there, and it is in the riffing because it sounds like there is a. That chugging sounds like a motor running, or like, you know, whatever. But and even
the layered guitars, that's the really high one and kind of the lower octave.
Yeah, it's this. It's also just this. You know, it's the style of playing itself. Like there's a lot of like, you know, Ritchie Blackmore is kind of notably like, you know, obviously there's some blues in there too, but like neoclassical kind of style of playing. I feel like there's some classical elements, especially on this song that I heard. And you know, maybe I could be wrong because, you know, some of the dates and like the people coming up, they could be around the same age. But I feel like certainly Deep Purple was big before this band became a thing. So I feel like, and they were a huge fucking band. I hear Deep Purple, I hear Ritchie Blackmore on a lot of this album as well, but especially this song.
Yep, I back that 100%. There's a riff at the kind of tail end of the song, 316 to 321. That is one of my favorite riffs on the whole record. Just fucking killer. It ends in such a really cool way. You get this great chorus to end it out, and then what's the final note on the track? Another Halford vocal kick. Very kind of Justin Hawkins-esque, honestly, from The Darkness. Like I heard that and went, oh yeah, that sounds like something on Permission to Land, which there's some stuff on this record that absolutely would influence that.
In the spot after the chorus, there's a instrumental break with like guitar and bass, like mirroring each other, and I like that a lot. Going back into the verse, there like is a weird transition part that the notes are very similar, or maybe it's the guitar tone reminds me of the Soup is Good Food like riff. For some reason, that like guitar or the vocal harmony of Tyrant reminds me of like Alice in Chains vocal harmonies.
That kind of good cop, bad cop layer that Alice in Chains is known for.
And after the second guitar solo, they did like a little halftime thing that I really liked.
Can't say enough about it. Like standout track for me.
Before anyone says anything about the next song, The next song is Genocide. Before anyone says anything about this song, the lyrics, what this song is about and what this song sounds like are so fucking disparate. Why would they make a song about genocide that sounds so fucking happy? Like, the riff is so fucking bouncy and sounds so happy, and it should, like, you should not have called this song Genocide and made the song about genocide. Do anything else.
I think he's still singing as the Tyrant, and he's committing a genocide. So I think he's still the Tyrant right now.
Oh my
and
God.
so he's like
It's
totally
a
down
concept
with
album.
it. Like, he's the one doing it, so he's down with it. But obviously, it's still, the lyrics are still horrific.
There are so many bands throughout the years that have done more fitting tracks about genocide and the despicable nature of what that is, that have done it so much better. You know, System of a Down has kind of, that was their thing for their first mini albums that they did. And then, like, I always go, when I saw the title of this track, there's a Gwar track that just keeps like the chorus is genocide. Who knows what that fucking track is about, because it's fucking Gwar. But it's like, I heard this and went, this is like a Thin Lizzy B-side.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like definitely not my favorite track of the record. It's got a pretty like standard like steak and potatoes kind of guitar riff. Very, very pentatonic, very blues driving. And that kind of persists through a lot of it.
It feels like, Swindle and I are big wrestling fans. There's a phrase used on like big pay-per-views and stuff a lot where they talk about, this is the Let Me Up match. This is kind of the Let Me Up track, the track that comes after the really good one.
Sure.
Where it's like, it's there. It also, to me, just feels like this was rooted in what was with the band. This doesn't feel like it's moving forward. This still feels like this is where the band was then. I heard the opening riff and was like, it sounds like Styx. I can't get past
That's so
it.
funny.
It sounds like
There, I mean,
Styx.
there are some.
Yeah.
There's some synth on here too, which is
Yeah.
kinda
Sounds
funny.
like Thin Lizzy. I think the weird spooky vocals in the middle of it, it was hard for me not to laugh because I kept going, bring me Solo and the Wookiee.
Well, yeah,
Like,
the first mention of the next record, Sin After Sin, he says it
Yeah,
on this
that's
track.
true.
So I did find that funny.
I wonder what, like, did Halford have these lyrics sitting around and like he was like, I gotta fucking use them, or like what when he heard this song, why he would have been like genocide. This song seems like it's about genocide,
dude.
Like,
you hit the nail on the head earlier when we were talking about Prelude at the beginning. This could very well be the track where the label was like, you have to have X amount of minutes for Wax. Like, you gotta have it. This kind of feels like the track of like, let's just put it on there. Let's just fill some time.
There's some conflicting history with this. I did read a few things that suggested that some of the tracks were like left over from the first record, and they may have ended up on here. Like I think with this one may have been one of the tracks they suggested. The Ripper, I think even Victim of Changes may have been like potentially written during the first era. That was disputed by Rob. He said that there was nothing that was played before the from this record before the debut. So I don't know if that's true or not. There was just something that popped up, but yeah, I don't know. This is fine. I don't really care for it that much. You do have some like back and forth soloing and guitar harmonies on here, classic type of thing. But for me, it's mostly just kind of the same riff throughout and variations of it. You do kind of, he has like kind of a rap part at the end of the song.
Yes, I caught that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very Informer-esque, you know?
Yeah, sure. But the thing I am most curious about, and I'm going to let CJ have the floor here because I want to hear his take on it. CJ, you messaged me the other day and you told me what you thought of Epitaph. What does this song sound like to you?
I literally wrote down Elton John-ass song.
Yeah. Yes. 100%.
It gives me, I don't know why this is here. It feels, I guess they wanted to try something different money.
Yeah. We need a hit.
They thought this was going to be the hit, I guess. I don't know. But yes, Elton John, background vocals kind of gave me a Queen vibe.
100%.
Yeah.
And then also, Dylan's going to love this. This might ruin the song for a lot of people, but the first few lines give me like Trey Parker South Park vibes.
Oh,
The first,
God.
like, I don't know, things he does with his voice
Yes.
give me Trey Parker vibes. It's so weird. But yes, like South Park, Elton John. I don't know what this song was.
I'm
I don't
done.
know why it's here.
Just
It is wild. Like, yeah, it's again, it's sequence weird. I don't think it needs to be on the album for sure because I would much prefer there to be like I would take I clearly take Genocide over this song for sure. But like, yeah, they were trying to do something that was popular at the time. You know, it's hey, Queen writes like this. Elton John
Hey.
like
Sabbath did changes. It
I
was
like that. That's a good song.
It's a good song, but like
Yeah.
Sabbath did changes. I even heard Billy Joel on
yeah,
this
sure.
track too.
I thought the same thing.
Yep.
At the beginning of this episode, when you said you thought this was a perfect record, I was so confused.
I think I didn't think I said it was a perfect record. I said it's close to a classic record for me. Like
Run the tape. Run the tape.
Yeah. I think this is mostly a pretty perfect record. I love it. There's definitely some things I will say maybe could be better or taken out of the record, but for the most part, it is like a pretty classic record of this band's discography. I believe what I said was that there are definitely some things that hinder its like feeling complete for sure. Like tracks like this, like what are we doing here? Like it just feels like
Young
like
band.
filler. Again,
Yep.
figuring it out.
Young band. I have one more thing to add to this track, not to already bury this thing any further. But there's certain points on this track, I heard it and I went, God, this could have been on Disney's Hercules. Like with how it I was like, Philatides just coming out like, this is his song.
Philatides.
Philatides.
Whoa. Hey.
He's taking it a completely different direction.
They were going the distance, you know?
Ah,
But it's weird. Like he's like,
there goes my ulcer.
the focal point of the song, and then he has like they do like the layered kind of choir thing with his vocals, and it's just I don't know. It takes you out of it a little bit for sure.
Because I'm having a good time, a good time.
Oh, 100%. All right, moving on from this one, we go into Island of Domination, and you get like this is jarring as fuck too because you basically. It leads in from Epitaph, and there's like this chugging that it's very like it does not do any favors. Like you have like a Dreamer Deceiver into Deceiver, where those like I could see like the through line with that, and they almost feel like they really just tried to smush them together, and it's like, oh, that's where are we at now? And then I get used to it. Like this is a fine song, but like it really just kind of goes left field. Like, oh, all right, I guess we're in this track now, but. All right, I'll be here for the ride.
You literally had to take a train from one track to the other because they were so far away. That's the chugging.
Yeah,
that's you taking the blue line or whatever to get there.
This is an interesting track to close out on, and it's so wild to think, the proposed A-side feels like a complete and total B-side of a record because okay. Island of Domination absolutely could stay on the album. 100%. I think Epitaph, Genocide, and Prelude, if those were gone, I mean, amazing. I think there's some great things in this track. It's a weird track to end on, though, to me. Like, it's almost anticlimactic at a certain point. Like, there's some great stuff in here. Like, some of these pentatonic, like, style blues riffs, very Led Zeppelin-esque, kind of in that blues box
like a
kind
whole
of thing.
There's like a whole ass, like, it slows down at one point. It's a blues like stomp riff.
Yes,
basically.
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I do appreciate some elements of like I think they played this one out clearly a lot more where they have like some kind of like effortless changes in tempo and some dynamics there. You get some like lead licks and solos that are they're a little bit underneath the mix, but they're in there for just a little bit of texture and everything. But I don't know. It's certainly a weird track to end on. Swindle, what do you think?
I like the after the galloping ceases and they get into the song. I think the bass is really cool at the beginning after the gallop part.
Really tight, like really tightly synced with the guitars at that point too.
Before the slowdown, there's like a walk down where they're like slowing it down. I really like that part. And then the slow down part kind of doesn't really sound like anything else in the album, but I think that like it's good. Like it doesn't stand out in a way that like takes away from the song. I think it like is an interesting part. And also I literally said that this song ends the way that every other song like the album ends the way every song in this album fucking ends, with Rob screaming. So like if they insisted on keeping like Victim of Changes song 1, they could have just stuck Prelude at the end of this album and it wouldn't have ended the same way literally every other song ends on this fucking album.
They ain't got the money for that, bud.
That sequence was done. Like once it was on tape, done.
Yeah. I mean,
I like to think that they when they got the test press, they just accidentally played the B-side first.
Fuck.
I will say, like, I wonder, like, did they have, for all of Gull's faults, did they have, like, when they heard the record, did they think, like, man, we got to, like, put the first half, but it's to the first half, or that like, Victim of Changes, B-side, do we need to move this forward? It's much stronger. It truly is. Like, I don't know.
It's logical.
Who knows? And then they just didn't have enough money to like make it seem like they knew what they were doing on the actual pressing of the thing. But
I think they got the test presses back. They accidentally played the B-side first because they didn't know how records work. And they were like, no, what do you mean? This is the first song on the album.
Yeah.
And Judas Priest was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, whatever.
They were all starving. Their stomachs were growling. They're like, yep, that's right.
That's
it.
That's right.
So
set it up, put it out, send it out.
The owner of Gull was like it was like the Looney Tunes thing where he like changed to a drumstick. Like
he is a maybe it's literally a Gull. Like maybe this is a label run by an actual seagull who has no understanding.
Thank you. Don't say thank you like that's a normal thing to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't anybody think that? It's called Gull. Obviously, it's ran by a bunch of just like rat birds. Like that's what it is.
That makes sense.
Like yeah, if it was called Goose, we'd have to go back and check that every band was off that label and fearing for their life.
Every record we press comes with a fish. Demanded.
They were like, here's 2,000 pounds. Get us a bunch of bread. Bring us bread back.
Next thing you're going to tell me is Penguin Press isn't ran by penguins.
You beat me. I literally was going to say Dylan buys all the Penguin Publishing House books because he's like, this penguin is really trying his best. Put this books out.
He made it out of the tundra. Somebody buys books.
He made it out.
All jokes aside, it's a fun record. It is odd to think when this record came out, this was almost considered extreme music.
Yeah, I mean, there for all the weird kind of more I don't want to say experimental stuff, but like like the piano, like I don't know, show tune-esque kind of song. There is some edge to this for sure. It's certainly heavier than the last record.
It's edging, all right.
But whereas like the previous record, Rocka Rolla failed to like do any sort of like charting, this record peaked at 48 on the UK charts. It did not chart in the United States at the time, but has since apparently sold 500,000 records here in the States.
Some kids' parents like heard this album, were shocked by the Ripper, and then they heard Genocide, and they're like, that's not so bad.
Yeah, a song called Genocide.
It's wild, too, because you mentioned, obviously it charted in the UK, no chart in the US, has just sold over 500,000 copies. Swindle and I did an episode at the end of last year on the Dead Kennedys. That album just went gold. Both of these albums are virtually the same age. It is like, all right, 50 years takes that just to barely go gold.
I'm sure those bands is reached a much higher plateau of fame than the other.
Absolutely. And that is what's even funnier about it. I know the Priest guys were sitting at this or at wherever Gull like held their meetings at. And they're like, "Hey guys, you charted."
The beach.
Or a parking lot somewhere.
And I know all of the guys in the band were like, "We get to eat."
Yeah.
This charted, they're going to give us crumpets.
They threw French fries on the ground.
You gonna eat that?
Enjoy, everyone.
You gonna eat that the rest of that soft pretzel bud? What are we doing here? So,
just throw
to
a
kind
bag
of
of
finish geez, they're gonna blow up. Yeah, that's how they got out of their contract. Speaking of which, so following the release of this record, the writing was on the wall with Gull. Like, they wanted out so badly. I think they had basically gone on the road pretty hard, like, after the release of this record. And because, like, Gull would not give them any sort of, like, financial backing, they would have to come off and work their, like, day jobs. They were, like, you know, like, day laborers or, like, contractors or, like, you know, mailmen and, like, all these sorts of, like, odd jobs. And, you know, they eventually went to him like, "Hey, can we just, like, have 25 quid to like do the band more seriously, like actually like give this a go?" And they just wouldn't budge.
Label just said nope.
Nah, sorry, bud. Yeah. So they did get signed to CBS Records, which is also pretty crazy to like present this and be like CBS. And I'm sure the company is obviously much different then, but CBS Records, now Columbia, signed the band to a deal. And although, they certainly would now have more financial backing, that would also mean they would have to give up the rights and the revenue to this record. But they have since regained that. But at the time, it's like, oh, now I have to give up basically all I had worked through with those first two records. Like, I just have to hand it over and like kind of start fresh. I even think that, for a period of time, Gull was essentially like repressing this record. I think they even did like a best of Judas Priest compilation in '77.
I bought that at like a consignment shop when I was like 12 years old because I saw it and I went, "Oh, I'm supposed to like this. It's the Samurai or something like that." A lot of labels did a ton of those best ofs when they were just trying to get a cash grab. It's one of those for sure.
Yeah, it's a compilation of basically those first two records. And it even, to kind of tie it back into the folk thing here, they do a cover of Joan Baez's Diamonds and Rust on the next record, Sin After Sin. This is a version of that song that was recorded prior to that release, but they did their version of it. And then even later on in time, they went back to like how the original version of it sounds, like more folky version. But yeah, they're kind of rooted in some of that world as well, I guess.
Didn't they do a Fleetwood Mac cover? Is there a Green Maharishi?
The Green Maharishi with the two prong crown, which is the Peter Green era of Fleetwood Mac. It is one of my favorite live versions of that. They on Unleashed in the East, they play it, and listen to that version of that track. It's fucking insane. So they have like, their blues influence, they have their folk influences that they still kind of tie to, but essentially after that they get signed to CBS Records. Alan Moore leaves, and then session drummer Simon Phillips appears on Sin After Sin. And there's a bunch of other shit that happens that maybe at some point we will get to, but as far as this, that's what happened. Final thoughts on the record, CJ?
Them wings are so sad. I enjoyed it overall. Like we discussed, few things you could have pulled out, but Tyrant and Ripper, like, they could have put out an album and just been those two songs, and I would have been like, hell yeah. So yeah, overall, solid. Not perfect. You're wrong. It's not perfect.
God. Jesus.
I didn't even.
He said it.
Editing that out. Swindle, what are your thoughts on this record?
It's fine. If I had even heard this like as a youngling, I probably wouldn't have been like amazed by it. It probably would have been more if I like listened to like British Steel or something, that would have got me more into Judas Priest as a young kid, but I think the few songs that are good are really good.
I enjoyed the record a lot. I think it's a very good transitional album for this band. They're finding they're finding their sound. That's ultimately what you get. And you get some really good tracks that show that. Victim of Change, Tyrant, The Ripper, Dreamer, Deceiver, I thought was a really cool song. I really enjoyed I guess technically the A side of the record so much more than I did the B side. And while it probably won't even be one that I would re-listen to as much, it definitely shows where the band saw that they had to change what they were. They knew, like, we have to get better. We have to do something different. We have to kind of stand away from the pack of what, some of these other bands that are contemporaries of ours are. And I enjoyed it. It's one that if like we put on, if we were all hanging out, I'd go, all right, fuck it, let it play through. Because I knew there were at least a couple tracks we'd go, okay, let's crack the beers and crack the jokes. Like, fun record, just a really fun record.
Yeah, I think I certainly feel the same way as you guys. I definitely, as a young person listening to this, it was like it blew me away, especially coming from British Steel. I think that's a great record. I do think that also in some aspects is a little safe as well. Like, I feel like records like Screaming for Vengeance have certainly more of an edge than British Steel. They just, again, got heavier as they went on. And that's not to say that there's not tracks on this record. As we've mentioned, some of these tracks have stood the test of time. They still cover the songs you would probably guess: The Ripper, Victims of Changes. Those tracks are still being played to this day. So they're kind of timeless and still a part of the set. It is a great transitional record. It has all of the elements that they would further expand on other records. I can't recommend just at least sitting with it and just seeing where this sound comes from. And you get if anything, you get that first half of the record that is just fucking strong and stellar. Like, yeah. So flawed, but still fun.
Absolutely.
All right, we've reached that part of the episode where we like to recommend some things we've been listening to, some things we think you should check out. I really just have one this week. Amenra announced 2 different EPs that they'll be releasing. You can get them separately, but it'd probably be best to get them in this kind of like deluxe package they're doing. Toorn and with Fang and Claw. I mean, it's probably going to be a journey from one end to the other, but they're going to be like 2 different like soundscapes essentially. I think Toorn is going to like kind of close out what they were doing with Dawn in 2019, which is also a great record. They put out like kind of a single, I guess, with Hedon. And there's a music video for that. But I saw this band last year. I had really only listened to Dawn previously. So I kind of went in really not knowing a lot about this band. It's got one of my like kind of favorite modern guitar players in Leonard, who played in Oathbreaker, and he plays in this band. And I was kind of blown away by the live performance. I've said it a few times, on previous episodes, where I remember being there and thinking like, oh, this is like maybe one of the best shows I've had. Like knowing in real time, like this is one of the best performances I've ever seen. So with that, there was no brainer. Like I really am looking forward to seeing what these EPs come to the table, and I'm sure it's going to be nothing short of bleak and just gutting, but also perfect.
I listened to the album Egyptian Democracy, which was a release last year from the band Intercourse. I don't really know how to describe them. It's like post-hardcore, hardcore, maybe a little screamo. 5 songs, less than 10 minutes. Weird fucking lyrics. Very weird.
So I've got 2 this week. First one is from Knoxville, Tennessee, deathcore heavyweights. Whitechapel, and their newest release comes out on March 7th through Metal Blade Records, Hymns and Dissonance. This is the band's first release since 2021's Kin. The last 2 records from this band were kind of a experimental territory, with the band getting a little bit more melodic, dealing with cleaner vocals, kind of more of these ambient rock projects. This is not that. This is as heavy and as knuckle dragging as you can fucking get. If you're familiar with the band's early work, this is very much in vein of that. You've got some really nasty vocal sounds going on in this. You've got 2 singles that have been released from this, which is drawing a fucking blank, which is the tracks Hymns and Dissonance, which was just released. And then you had the track that was released around mid-time last year, which was A Visceral Wretch. Really looking forward to this. I hope most of the record sounds like these 2 tracks that I've heard so far. And the next thing that I have is, I've been waiting for this for quite some time. It's the new Cradle of Filth album. It's the Screaming of the Valkyries. It will be released through Napalm Records on March 21st of this year. We just recently heard a new single, To Live Deliciously. It's Cradle of Filth. I don't really have to describe it. You know what you're going to get. The band isn't really like champing at the bit to release anything other than what this band releases, but I'm really looking forward to it.
None of these are really new albums or anything. I guess the newest thing is I've been listening to JIVEBOMB, their demo, enjoying that. I randomly came across this band called Mouthing, and it's a self-titled album.
Is this the thing you sent me the other day?
Yes, you called it abrasive.
Yeah.
And I thought was very rude. It's just it's just screaming off. It's just a ton of screaming. I don't know why that's so abrasive to you. And then it snowed here recently, so I was listening to Either Or, Elliot Smith's album.
Ooh, feeling good about yourself, huh? In a really good, happy mood.
Yeah, just crashing into snowbanks.
Elliot Smith does that to people.
Yeah.
that first good snow that we got, I was driving around and I put on Nebraska and drove around long enough just to listen to that record. It's like, all right, let's go home. This isn't going to end well for me.
Yeah, you got to be a little sad when it's snowing.
Just a little.
Recently there was an episode of Car Talk where they were like, what is it about being a man that as soon as you see snow, it makes you want to go out and drive? And when you fucking said that, I was just like, what is it?
Because it's fun. You get to, sometimes you turn and then, but then you don't turn. The car just keeps going.
Yeah.
What is it? Is it the Simpsons Christmas episode, or is it a King of the Hill Christmas episode where he's just sliding around in the alleyway, just driving his car because it's snowing?
Oh my God.
He's so depressed, he's just staring deadpan and the car is just spinning out.
Yeah, you just put on the Tokyo Drift song. You just put that on and you just do some donuts in a parking lot.
Those are what we've been listening to this week. You can check it out below. I have all the links provided for you. We also have official playlist Riffs on Repeat on Spotify, Hits from the Crypt on Apple Music. You can follow us at Riff Worship Pod on Instagram and Twitter at Riff Worship Pod. Email us, riffworshippod@gmail.com. CJ, thanks so much for joining us this week. It was nice to do the podcast we'd always hoped of doing.
Yeah, it was a fun time. I got to bring up Shanghai Nights just to make you mad, so It was worth it.
I'll secretly begrudge you for the rest of my life that you didn't do a podcast with Austin, and then I had to do a podcast with Austin because you didn't.
I'm glad to know I was the third choice.
It was a completely different thing, but
I've taken that in stride in my life that I've always been the third choice for anything I've ever been involved with. I have reviews from the Dillbozer's Den. I drop those on occasion. We got one coming pretty soon.
I think so. All right. Well, this has been Riff Worship for Dylan, for me, for Swindle, for CJ. We'll be back next week with something else. See ya. Bye.